I have the biggest pimple right here. It's so big. Don't look at it. It's a mess. What's up, guys? It's your girl Books with Bunny, and I'm back with another effing video. Ugh. What have I been doing? I don't even know. So this video is going to be about my 2 reviews that I promised. I promised I'd do a review on Queenie and then Thickerella. So let's jump into this video. So let's start with Queenie. So Queenie is a story about a British native. She is African descent and she is in an interracial relationship, which actually got put on hold. So her significant other, his name was Tom, recommended that they take a break. Queenie experienced some traumatic things, which she did not share with him prior to said break. And in her head, a break just meant time between them getting back together. So she did experience a lot of, in my opinion, things within their relationship, but then how she coped with being away from him was not the best. Some warnings on this one. It talks about losing family relationships. It talks about healthy sexual relationships, balances around that. And because it's an interracial relationship, of course, race and conversations about diversity comes up in the book. So that is my biggest highlights of said book. Now, my opinion on the book. It's a challenge. It was definitely a challenge for me to read. One, the main love interest was not a good person in my opinion. And his name was Tom, which is also my fiance's name. So I don't like that. The story, I think Queenie used a lot of bad things to cope. And of course, when you do that, you spiral. And then there's this down period until you build yourself back up. And that literally is what Queenie did. I think with Tom, she highlighted a lot of their bigger fights, which always had to do with things that he doesn't necessarily experience himself. So he downplayed her feelings about things. Sorry, but I'm gonna give you a spoiler. So there is a conversation around family and them spending time with his family, and his uncle makes a very ignorant racial comment. And of course, Queenie responds or reacts very, in my opinion, calmly about it. She just acknowledges it, and it kind of spirals because she's upset. And then there's other things that take place because she's upset, and then it seems as though she's overreacting. That pissed me off. As a person in an interracial relationship, it is very important to understand that your experience is different, but also ain't nobody fucking stupid. Like, that's what irritates me the most, is when people try to pretend like, oh, it's just a racial slur. It's just a racial slur coming from somebody that's in my family that you have to spend this time with. Like, no big deal. What? Ugh. Like, that irritated me. But I like that it was a part of the conversation, because I think it happens a lot more than people understand. And this one was a little bit more in your face about it, but I think it's really important to also address the microaggressions that happen in those spaces. I mean, it's an ongoing conversation in my relationship, but not everybody has had that conversation, or not everyone in the relationship understands it from that perspective. So I really actually enjoyed that it was in the book. It pissed me off, but I think it also ties into like having more conversations around said things. They also talked about like the Black Lives Matter movement and the killings that happened in Minnesota. And me being in Minnesota at the time that these things were happening, it felt very like one-sided, meaning that it's happening here, it's happening in Minnesota, it's happening in America. But to hear about it from a perspective that's on the other side of the world really opened my eyes to like the impact that it had, and how it happens everywhere, and how it impacts everyone differently. And it was just really, again, very great to see that in the story. Also, she added an extra twist to it because she brought that kind of conversation into the workspace, which I thank God I have worked for a company that was like, we are going to talk about this in the workspace because this is our people and we're a diverse company. And they don't just say it, they mean it in every single thing they do. So yes, I love my job, but for that aspect, but I also understand that there are a lot of companies that don't know how to have that conversation, so they don't. And this was a great example of like why the importance of this conversation needs to continue and how to make people feel safe. I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic on top of that. So mental health, all of those things are important, but also it's a different layer when you're talking about the experience, in my opinion. Again, this is on my opinion. You could agree or disagree, but I'm gonna tell you again, I'm not gonna tussle with y'all in them comments, so viewers beware. That was a big chunk of the book for me, at least my takeaway from the book, was just how those things are in every aspect of your life, like work, friends, family, relationships. Like, it's so important to feel safe in those spaces. Also, there is a pretty traumatic thing that happens to Queenie in the beginning of the book, like right in the beginning, like first chapter, something happens to her and she doesn't share that with her partner. And I didn't until just now realize like how that plays into the relationships you have with people. Like, if I go through something, my fiance is the first person to know. Like, he knows on top of it. Then I'm gonna tell everybody else that I care about, and then I'll go back and tell my fiance what everybody else just said. But the fact that something traumatic happens to you and you don't tell your person, it says everything I need to know about the relationship. Like, if you can't share your weaknesses with your person, then are they really your person at that point? Say that 10 times fast. What else? I do like that this was a big mental health conversation. Like, the whole book was just talking about mental health. And then there's a point where she dives into that more with experience, or the character dives into it more with experience. And it just makes me think about all of the people who, especially in the African descent region, I feel like mental health wasn't taken as serious in my spaces with people that I loved and care about. And now I'm the biggest advocate around those people. Like, oh, you're just playing crazy, or like just not taking it serious as a part of your health. Like, they take your physical and they comment about and criticize your physical. So why aren't you just as concerned with my mental? Is normally my response. It's like, it should be concerns about all, or are you just using that to devalue me? Question. Overall, I really enjoyed this book, but I also hated her like self-sabotaging. So I gave the book overall like a 3.8. It was interesting. I'll give you that. It was interesting. Moving on. Okay, so then the second book that I read was Thickerella. It's by T. Glover. I'm forgetting how to say her first name again. I'm terrible. Correct me every time. I'll put the title as well as the author's name in the bottom of the description box. So yeah, so the book Thickerella is about, I want to say Telly is her name. Telly, let's just call her T. So basically what she did, or her experience, was, it's kind of the Cinderella story in a different way. So it's a mom, a dad, and she has a brother. And she has a great relationship with her dad, but not with her mom or her brother. And then her dad passes. Not a spoiler, it's really early in the story. You find out that he passes. And it definitely impacts her going forward. Again, she doesn't have the best relationship with her mom, doesn't have the best relationship with her dad, and she's basically forced to grow up too soon. Basically. A lot of responsibility put on her, a lot of criticism, a lot of critiquing constantly, all of the above. So she does have to get a job right away. She has to start helping in the household, cooking, cleaning, you know, Cinderella. Afterwards, she does get into college and she leaves home. She moves to Atlanta, and that's where she really established herself. Due to her poor experience with family, it does cause her to gain weight, have bad, you know, anxiety and things like that. And then she moves to Atlanta, goes to school, and that's where she really identifies with who she is as a person. She gets her clothes tailor-made. She has fancy shoes. She has a really awesome job, really living the life that she wanted to live. But then her mom calls her and tells her she has to come back home and help pay for the house that is now in foreclosure. And for her, she's kind of stuck between I don't give a damn, and that's also the home that my dad helped build and the house I was raised in. So it kind of has a bittersweet kind of connotation to it. So she does eventually go back home to help with the money situation. How do I feel about this book? A lot of mixed feelings. A few things that really stood out to me is, I haven't seen a lot of this, but the relationship between women, young women and older women. Now that I am an older woman, I still don't get it. Like, what's the beef? What's the bullshit? Like, let's call it for what it is. I got really frustrated with certain things that was said to the main character about her body, about who she is as a person. It's just toxic, hella problematic. And although it's super frustrating, a lot of women, especially African descendant women, have this experience. Not necessarily always with their mother or their brother, but there are definitely some experiences that I thought back to while reading this book when I was younger. Reading this book. And when I think about it, it's just like, y'all weird. And I have to remind myself of where she was when things were being said to her. Like, you have a person who is going through puberty and all the changes in their body, and what you think is important right now is to tell them that you're developing too fast, or you think you're fast, or you're carrying yourself a certain way, and you stay in your place. It's weird because it's like, stay in a child's place, but I also want you to be an adult when it's convenient. And it's like, problematic. So yeah, I think it's really important to highlight that, because I really hate this stigma of older women feeling like they can judge young women for finding out who they are. I've had full-on debates, arguments with family members for making comments that I felt was inappropriate, whether it's towards me or towards my siblings. Like, fuck no, we're not doing that. That's weird. You're giving off weird energy. No, we're not doing that. This is why I don't have kids, because hell no. Like, hell no. Anywho, so I thought that was really important. It's another layer of that, because although the girls are taught to grow up and take care of everybody else, there's also this unsaid responsibility for the lack thereof responsibility for the males. So in the story, like, she had to go to work, she had to grow up, she had to hurry up and move out. But then her brother didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to move out. He didn't have to help pay bills. He didn't have to help clean. And I hate that. I hate this, well, he's a boy. And it's like, yeah, he needs to learn how to take care of his house. He needs to learn how to fend for himself too. Which is interesting, because when she came back home, her brother still stayed home. And that just, it happens again so much. The males are pacified while the women are forced to grow up. And then you ask about the relationship between those two dynamics, and I thought that was like, yes, like, this is important and relevant. What else did I like about this book? I also liked that the character kind of took ownership of her body in a lot of spaces where people would have been uncomfortable. There's a scene where she goes to the barbershop and she's surrounded by men, and me personally, hell no, I'm not comfortable. I mean, it's so interesting, like, the dynamics and how, and I always think of things from like a psychological perspective. I'm always thinking about mental health and just like the anxiety that these things cause people on a daily basis that no one talks about. So I just thought it was really important, and really, it pisses me off because it's like, I hate this, but it's like, it's so important. This needs to be talked about so it can be addressed, so people can start having those conversations. So I really love that aspect of it too. And I also like that she was plus size. Like, her mom used that against her as a bad thing, but then you see people complimenting that, and it's like, beauty standards, of course, are addressed because you're like, well, I don't fit into the quote unquote beauty standards. However, she owned her own beauty, and that was really great. The only thing I had an issue with in the story was just two things. One was that she owned her beauty standards, but then she also compared every other woman she interacted with. So it's like, oh, we're gonna have a great relationship because you like my shoes. And I don't think it's that simple. I don't think it's that easy. I mean, there's even a scene where it involves a guy and another woman gets jealous. And it's like, yeah, but it's like, aren't we past this already? Like, are we still like not liking girls because they like a guy we may or may not like? Like, aren't we over that? So that I didn't really like, or I didn't really care for. It didn't make a huge impact on me, but it was annoying. And then the last part is like, because she had insecurities or past trauma based on her body and past relationships, it was a scene where she jumped to conclusions, and I just didn't see it adding value to the storyline, in my opinion. She was like, I'm gonna jump to this conclusion. And he reassured her, which loved it. It was a great tactic to show like he's invested. But at the same time, it was like, can we not and say we did? Like, can we say we did it and just not do it? Because I'm totally fine with that too. So I don't know, that kind of bugged me, but overall, I, again, really love this story. I give it a 4 out of 5 stars too. It was definitely enjoyable, and it was a lot of good stuff. Like, honestly, great conversations. I'm really considering starting back up my book club, and we might actually read the series because it was so good. And I think it's, again, great conversations, great things to come from it. So yeah, those are the 2 books that I read. Quick update on my current reads. I'm currently reading This Time Next Year. Who is it by? I'm forgetting who is it by. Wait a minute. I have to find out who's it by. I believe it's by something Cousins. Ooh, let me find out. Okay, so I'm currently reading This Time Next Year, and that's by Sophie Cousins. I'm enjoying that. I'm only on the first like 80 pages of it, so I also just finished the second book of the Clue series. And then last but not least, I do still have my cozy murder mystery Christmas book. So I got like 2 more books left on my TBR, and then after that I'm done for the year. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure you comment down below what books you're currently reading, or what was a number, let's see, how many books you got left to read for the December month. So we got some time, so we got a little bit of time to get through these last few books. It's your girl Books with Bonnie. I'm out.